As people enter the room for the webinar, I'm just going to give a couple updates. My name is Rachel Witt. I'm on the board for the St. Louis Metro section as treasurer and public advocacy co-chair. Just a little housekeeping. You should have received an email from the e-newsletter and from on LinkedIn about our winter workshop, which will be December 9th from 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at the City Winery at City Foundry. It will cost $40 and you will receive 2 CM credits. Also, if you're available after the winter workshop, we will have a social event at Putt Shack for an additional $15 to attend. We hope to see you there, and it's going to be a great discussion and a really good time. Today we are talking about building code reform in the state of Missouri, and I would like to introduce our moderator, Charlie Hinderliter. Charlie is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at St. Louis Realtors, where he leads the association's public policy and economic development efforts. With over 2 decades of experience at the intersection of policy, development, and civic engagement, he brings people together to solve complex challenges, whether streamlining local permitting systems, expanding tools to address vacancy, or advancing a state building code. Charlie is deeply engaged in the St. Louis region's economic and civic life. He serves on the executive committees of both the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership and Citizens for Modern Transit, helping shape regional strategies around business growth, transit access, and neighborhood investment. He also represents St. Louis Realtors on a range of boards and advisory groups focused on housing, transportation, and equitable development. A graduate of the University of Missouri St. Louis, Charlie was a PhD candidate in political science at the University of South Carolina. Before joining St. Louis Realtors, he led advocacy outreach for the St. Louis Regional Chamber. He has also taught political science at Maryville University, Western Illinois University, and Jefferson College, and worked on a number of political campaigns. Let's welcome Charlie as our moderator. Our speaker today is Mindy Allison. Mindy is the Outreach Director for Safer Plus Simpler Missouri, a coalition of 28 organizations advocating for a state building code. With a strong background in community engagement and partnership development, Mindy is an experienced coalition builder and strategic connector dedicated to improving systemic policies, drawing on diverse experiences in nonprofit, healthcare, and tech startup sectors. Mindy brings a unique perspective to building a variety of coalitions, including Safer Plus Simpler Missouri, the Kauffman Fund's Mental Health Collaborative for Veterans, and the St. Louis Building Trades Wellness Coalition. She works to develop these strategies through data, community stakeholder engagement, focus groups, and more. Whether supporting institutional initiatives or grassroots collaborations, Mindy is passionate about bringing organizations, people, and data to build healthier, more connected communities. Mindy received her BA from the St. Louis University in Political Science, International Studies, Sociology, and Spanish. She is currently studying for her Master's of Public Health from the St. Louis University. Let's all welcome Mindy as our speaker today.
Rachel, thank you so much for having us. You want us to go ahead and jump right in?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll set a little context for kind of how we got here with Safer Simpler Missouri. And then we'll have Mindy kind of dig into the weeds and give you the details of what this is and how it's hopefully going to work. A few years back, St. Louis Realtors did a report around building codes. And as it turns out, St. Louis is fragmented. And I'm really disappointed I can't hear the groans and eye rolls that come with, us releasing a study that shows St. Louis is fragmented. Goodness knows we've had enough of those. But what we found is when we dug into building codes in particular, the scale of the problem was something that we didn't realize. So if you look at one set of building codes, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the commercial, the residential, property maintenance, if we look at those 6 code books. It's about 3,000 pages if you're looking at 1 year of codes. They get updated every 3 years, but if we're on one consistent set of codes, about 3,000 pages. What we found back in 2021 is if we looked at the codes that were in operation across St. Louis County, if you took the 9,000 page Internal Revenue Code, the US tax code, and you added War and Peace, Moby Dick, Roots, the 3 Lord of the Rings books, the 7 Harry Potter books, I need like another 50-page novella to get to the roughly 17,000 pages of codes that were on operation in St. Louis County in 2021. And the trick is it's gotten worse, not better, because then the most current code anybody was on the 2018. And we've seen folks stay on old codes, but we've seen folks go to newer codes like the 2021 and 2024. We've not recalculated that. But needless to say, that's not best practice. I think one of the most compelling stories I heard was from a plumbing contractor, that every truck, they have to have purple PVC cement and clear PVC cement. The only difference is the color. There is purple dye in the purple, and there's not in the clear. The clear is prettier because you can't see it. The purple, the inspector can see that it was used because it's purple. But some jurisdictions require clear and some require purple. On its own, that's a totally rational decision. But taken collectively, if every plumbing truck has to have 2 colors of cement and they have to use the right one, or they could fail an inspection, that is no longer rational. That's one decision in 3,000 pages of code. How do we get a more rational system level solution so that we don't have these challenges where inspectors get yelled at because they've failed somebody for something that's just the rules. You have to follow the rules, but maybe they were looking at the county rules, not the municipality rules, and this is confusing. So we did a second building code report. So if you'd like to read those, Safer Simpler Missouri's website has those. If you have trouble sleeping at night, they're both about 20 pages. But what we realized is that 44 states do this. This isn't normal. So we're going to dig into this with Mindy. So Mindy, let's start with the current status of building codes. How are building codes implemented in Missouri today?
Okay, so we're going to pull up this nice little map. So what's happening in Missouri today is that the code adoption, the update, the enforcement is all done at the local level, whether that's county, municipality, or fire protection district. And so the map that you see on the screen right now is showing the 13 counties that have enacted a county level code and the 352 municipalities that have enacted a code. And you can see all of the different colors. Those colors are representing each of the different years that are currently active. I just want to point out at the very bottom, you see pink legacy code. That is just a bucket for anything that's older than 2000. So there's 28 municipalities across Missouri that have a code older than 2000, right? So in those 13 gray counties, those code years range from 2000 in Cole County up to 2018 with Platte and St. Louis County. And there is an existing statute in Missouri right now that if you are a 3rd or 4th class county, you are not allowed to enact the county level code unless you put it up to a general vote to your population to say, yes, our population wants to have a county level code. So we reiterate that in the Missouri Building Codes Act. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There are a handful of counties that are that 2nd class county that could choose to enact the county level code, but the vast majority of those counties that are white on the screen are 3rd class counties. And so they would face that restriction. So one thing I do want to point out about this map, there's one type of jurisdiction that can adopt codes that is not portrayed on here, and that's the fire protection districts. Fire protection districts sometimes are connected just to a single municipality. Right? Sometimes they cover a whole area, and so they've got multiple municipalities to cover. So I know for St. Louis specifically, there's some of these North County fire protection districts that have a dozen plus municipalities that they cover. So when it comes right down to it, you could be in a jurisdiction in an area, your address could have 3 different jurisdictions that have adopted a code. So to show this at just a lower level, let's just zoom in middle of the state. Okay. So Boone County, this is, I've got this broken down by Senate districts. Boone County happens to be its own Senate district. So the fire protection district for Boone County uses 2015. And then you can see Ashland is using 2012. And then you see Columbia is using 2018 for both IBC and IRC. So now let's stay in central Missouri and let's go to Senate District 6, which is Jefferson City, Lake of the Ozarks, right? And you can see that Cole County on 2000, we've got a group on 2000, but then we've got St. Martin's, St. Thomas, and Taos on 2003, right? But then you get down to Lake of the Ozarks, Camdenton, Osage Beach, they're on 2018. We get to the Fire Protection District, the Osage Fire Protection District is using 2023, right? So across just these two areas in central Missouri, there are at least 7 different code years in use. So you heard Charlie talk about like the St. Louis part of it, but this isn't just a St. Louis issue. This is something that is across the whole state.
So Mindy, that's how we accidentally ended up with the statewide coalition is we thought this was a St. Louis problem. As it turns out, it's not just a St. Louis problem. How do other states do this? Do other states do state building codes?
Yes. And in fact, most states do have a building code, 44 of them, right? So you can see on this map, all the orange states, those are the 6 states that have yet to adopt a state level building code, right? And Illinois is actually the most recent adopter to a state code. They just implemented this year their state building code. At the other end of the timeline, staying in the Midwest, Wisconsin adopted their state level building code in 1914, before World War I. So there have been this is largely a thing that states have adopted a state level code in the 20th century, right? And most of the states have adopted, and some of them over 100 years ago.
So when we started this project, we were looking for Mr. Potato Head. We wanted to borrow different ideas from different jurisdictions to see what worked best for us. Initially assuming that to be St. Louis County and now looking at Missouri. And we were looking for the gold-plated Mr. Potato Head. Is there a gold standard out there?
Not really. And so through the research, what we found is that one state code, one state code, right? Each state does their state code in the way that makes the most sense for their state. But what we did find were some various trends, right? And so looking at the map again, you see of the blue states, there's various colors of blue, and those various shades indicate the variation that each state allows at that local level. So those darkest blue states, the Wisconsin, the Indiana, the Vermonts, those states, it is a state code. You are not, and you have to adopt the state code. You must build to the state code. There's no local variation, right? And as the color gets lighter, the more permissive the state is as it comes to local variation. So for instance, if we want to go to our neighbors in Oklahoma, they will allow the individual jurisdictions just lets the state know, yep, we're going to be participating in that and enforcing the state code. And so they get to choose with that, and they also get to make local amendments to fit a local need. What we're proposing with the Missouri State Building Code Act would put Missouri in this lightest blue. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Another way that we've seen some trends is the various ways that the states create their codes. And so there's generally 3 buckets. So there's generally a governor-appointed commission, or a state agency that manages it all, or the state legislature does it. Thankfully, our coalition very quickly is like, no, we're not letting the legislature touch this on a regular basis. And we are proposing a governor-appointed commission. Another kind of trend that we saw is what kinds of codes are generally adopted in their set of base codes. Some states keep it pretty narrow to just, 4 or 5 codes. Some have a whole host of codes that they adopt. Most commonly, we're looking at energy codes. 41 states have included some level of energy code in there. building or the commercial codes, 40 states, mechanical, 36 of the states have the mechanical code, 33 have residential, 32 have a plumbing code, 31 have the existing building code, 25 include the fire code, 24 electrical code. So what the codes that we're proposing are in line with what's most common across states.
So speaking of that legislation that Safer Simpler Missouri has developed with its 28 coalition partners, let's get in the weeds a little bit about that. Can you tell us more what's in the bill?
Yes. So if you want to look it up, SB 743 was our 2025 bill that we were supporting. And we do have some updates that we're hoping to have pre-filed that we can share that link out, the pre-file link out for folks to see the 2026 version. SB 743 is going to be the most recent language that we worked on. And it's a relatively short bill. It's 14 pages. So we're not asking you to read a whole bunch of stuff if you want to dig in. And just high level, some things that are in the bill. We're creating that uniform, predictable standard. This is going to be a state-based code, right? Across the code areas. Again, we're looking at commercial, the building code, residential, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. In 2026, we're including the existing building and the fuel gas code as well. This is also only going to apply in a district, in a jurisdiction where a code already exists. So this is not going to impose a code on those areas that don't currently have a code. This is really just streamlining the existing regulations around building. Part of that, a large part of that, just comes down to logistics, because we're leaving a lot of things at the local level. If you don't currently have the infrastructure to do permitting, if you don't currently have the resources to do the enforcement, you're not going to be able to do anything that we put in this bill. So until we can get some more resources around that for those rural areas, we just really want to focus on streamlining where those resources already exist. This also explicitly exempts agricultural buildings. Now, the farmer's house, if they're in a district that enforces some sort of code, that would be to the code, but like the barn where the cows or the pigs are is not necessarily. Again, we're focusing on that life safety piece of it. This is also, like I mentioned earlier, this is a governor-appointed commission of people who know about codes, making the rules for the state code. So as it's written currently, it's 9 people: an architect, an engineer, a general contractor, home builder, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire marshal, and a building official. So those 9 people will be looking through the codes, and we're adding language for 2026 that they have to have a 2/3 consensus on what goes into this, right? Next, we are still preserving local control, right? We're streamlining what the base code is, but locals still do all the enforcement. Locals will still do all of the permitting, and we'll be able to make amendments that are specific needs of their community. When I presented with the Lake of the Ozarks code officials group, one of the things that they were super concerned about was dock safety. Because people put docks out, they run electrical out there, and like if they don't do it right, it makes the water electrified and people die, right? So they are very concerned about dock safety. So if they review the state's code and there's like, no, we need to tweak this on this, they will still be able to make that local amendment to meet their needs. We also include a state permit fee. So this would be in addition to whatever the local jurisdiction has their permit fee set at. There's a state permit fee that sits right on top of that as an additional line item. We cap it at $7 a permit. Real mark of a nerd is that you've got a favorite spreadsheet. I've got a favorite spreadsheet of how I came to that number. If you want to go deep into numbers with me, let me know. I will gladly bring that up and nerd out with you about how I came to that $7 cap. And that fee would be collected at the permit. That jurisdiction on a monthly basis submits all the fees that they collected to the state. And then that fee will fund the administration of the office for that. We're expecting relatively small office for that. And we'll also have funding available to do training for building code officials, plan reviewers, those folks that need to know about the code really well. And lastly, we're providing resources for local jurisdictions. Like I mentioned, there's going to be training for those building officials and inspectors, fire marshals, for that more consistent piece of it.
All right. So where do we stand right now as we look ahead to the 2026 legislative session?
Okay, so 2020, any of you who have been paying attention to the legislature over the last year know that it's kind of sticky. There's been some groups that have been pretty upset with some of the decisions that have been made. So it's prognosticated that there's not going to be a lot that happens with the 2026 session. However, we are still going to push where we see this as an opportunity to really educate those staffers, those legislators. We are working to have both a Senate and a House bill to run concurrently. And we do hope we will be pushing to pass it this year. But again, let's look at the political reality of the situation at the legislature for the politics. And we will be having a lobby day in the Capitol on February 10th. Our goal really is to pass this in the next 1 to 3 years.
All right, so let's talk a little politics. We have a room full of folks that generally work for local government. We even have a staffer from the St. Louis Municipal League. Hi, Colin. Two of our opponents have been the Missouri Municipal League and the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis in terms of this legislation. We're of the opinion that this legislation is good for local governments, but it does take away a little bit of local power. Mindy, tell us a little bit about what we think this is, why we think this is good for municipalities and local government.
Okay, so there's a few things that we think this is going to be good for those local jurisdictions. So first, lower insurance costs. So having a building code within the last 2 code cycles is part of what helps keep insurance rates lower for residents. It's part of the ISO rating aspect that any of your municipalities go through. We also see this as a revenue generator. So one part, I mentioned the state building code fee, that permit fee. There's a mechanism in the bill that if you can show compliance with the different parts of the bill, that there can be an incentive that you get part of that fee back, right? So if it's set up, say it's set at $6 a permit fee, you show your jurisdiction does everything right, you can get $1.50 back or something. Those are just numbers. We don't know what it would actually boil down to. And this is also going to reduce the code update burden, because right now this is all happening at that local level. And so that commission is happening across the whole state, right? And having to review and do all of this. Instead, the state's going to do the big review, and then you can choose to do a longer review on those local amendments to see if there's something that like, oh, we want to tweak this part of it. We're also going to be training, right? This is going to be those training opportunities for inspectors, for the fire marshals, for those plan reviewers. And this is going to be at no cost to municipalities to provide that professional development for that. And because it's all going, oh, go ahead.
But we did have one question to comment about who's going to be doing the training. The way we look at this is there are great groups out there already doing this. Mayboy, MABCA, MABFO, Fire Marshals Association of Missouri. The idea is, how do we empower those groups to do more of this? How do we incentivize fire marshals and building officials, those that aren't already involved, to take advantage of the training that exists? How do we scale up what's already happening? So our goal is to do it through those professional organizations.
That's a great question. Thank you, Charlie. So another piece that we think is good is because we're all going to have the same base code, they're all going to be able to receive the same training. It's going to be good opportunities for collaboration. We already know there's not enough code officials, plan reviewers out there. How do we better utilize what we have to share those resources in a meaningful way? I also just want to highlight, we're not changing everything about this system. There are some things that we're leaving the same, like I mentioned before. Locals are keeping enforcement, right? Locals are keeping permitting. You still collect your same permit fee. You still keep all that permit fee. All you're doing is adding an additional line item for the state permit fee to be sent up monthly. You are keeping zoning any zoning regulation at your local level, and any property maintenance rules that you want to have or enforce that is still happening at that local level. We are not touching those 4 items.
All right, so that kind of touches what the bill changes, what we think the benefits are to local jurisdictions. But a hot topic this year has been natural disasters. We have seen tornadoes doing damage across the state of Missouri. How do codes support community disaster resilience?
So I found this map very helpful. This is all the tornadoes that have happened in Missouri in 2025, 117 of them. That has been a record-setting year since we started keeping records of the number of tornadoes in Missouri. Tornadoes are happening everywhere in the state, right? Maybe the northern part of the state is a little not getting hit as often, but you can see there's a variety of spots that have been hit. And you can see by the scale, we're getting a variety of different ones that are getting hit as well, right? So there's also a thing to look at when you're looking at natural disasters, just the scale of like these natural disasters are happening everywhere. So NOAA has a data set around billion-dollar disasters, and these are all adjusted for inflation for the amounts. And so you can see on the screen the decades and the total billion-dollar disasters that have happened in Missouri. And then let's just look at the severe storm. So severe storm is tornadoes, wind, hail. And so you'll notice we're getting more of those severe storms of tornadoes, wind, hail with every decade, right? And so we know that these natural disasters are going to keep happening because the data shows that they're going to keep happening. So building codes can improve the resiliency of the built structures. Last month, we did an event with Missouri S&T in Rolla, where they have the wind hazard mitigation lab studying the impacts of wind on structures. And that research is included in newer versions of the code, right? So great example is from the 2011 Joplin tornado, right? Now, that was an EF5 tornado. No building will withstand a direct hit from an EF5 tornado, but buildings that are a mile away from that are still going to be hit by those really strong winds, right? You're still going to see plenty of damage to roofs and other structure pieces, right? So how can we look at those strong winds? So one of the things that was looked at from the Joplin tornado was, oh, there's a lot of roofs that were coming off and structures were being shifted off of the foundations, right? And so what are the things that we can do to keep a structure bolted to its foundation? How do we keep that roof on? So anyone who's seen me in person knows I have this little gadget right here. It's called a hurricane clip. And this was one of the things that got added to the code in response to roofs coming off during high wind events, right? And so it goes on your rafter and your wall to keep that roof tucked on. This didn't get added to the code until the 2018 code cycle, right? So this is one of those things that this little thing, it's about $1 a piece at Home Depot, and it keeps your roof on when there's a high wind event. And so if you're on a code that's older than 2018, you're not necessarily getting that protection, right? And so that's where having an updated code, you're including the things that we've learned from past disasters to keep your roof on. So I do want to talk a little bit more about this too. Like this is a picture from Hurricane Harvey that hit several years ago. And you can see these houses, the years that they were built. You can see the ones that were renovated or built more recently stood up better than the ones that were built to older standards, right? And there's you want to look at other ways to increase community resiliency. Alabama is actually a leader in this space. They get hit by hurricanes and tornadoes. And so they were looking at, okay, well, we've got these codes, but like it's not enough. We got to do something to make our homes more resilient. So they started looking at state policy to build upon that state building code to increase that resiliency. So part of that is providing grants to middle and low income homeowners to upgrade their roofs to the IBHS fortified standard. It's an above code standard, and it gives their policy also includes a provision that guarantees those homeowners that go through the process to get a fortified home get a reduced home insurance rate. So Alabama has the most homes in the nation that have been certified fortified, and it's paid off. So Hurricane Sally was Category 2 hurricane that made landfall in 2020 and made damage to a lot of homes and businesses in coastal Alabama and Florida. In the path, they had 17,000 fortified homes and 19 fortified commercial structures, and 95% of those structures saw little to no damage during the storm. And so, like I said, Alabama also gets hit by tornadoes, particularly as you go a little bit further north in the state. So in 2023, they had a devastating supercell of tornadoes that hit both Mississippi and Alabama, and damaged 16,000 residential structures across the region. And in Prattville, Alabama, there was a homeowner, because Habitat for Humanity has a partnership to guarantee any of the things that they make, they do it to a fortified standard. And so this homeowner who has a fortified roof from Habitat for Humanity was in the direct path of this EF3 tornado and only suffered shingle loss and damage soffit. So essentially some aesthetic stuff, but the large structure of the home was safe. So because Alabama has been a leader in this and they've been able to show, hey, this is good to do this kind of incentive program, these states that you see in green on the map have all adopted some version of those incentives. Okay, so not only do building codes include things like, okay, in the 2018, you get this to keep your roof on, but there's the above code standards and incentives that can happen for the state.
All right, that's the end of our Q&A. Now we're very curious to hear your Q&A. So we'll turn it over to Rachel to moderate that piece of this.
Looks like the first question we have was from Brian Hare. He is asking, is there a publication that details the differences between each code edition?
Yes. So, like the Mayboy, MABCA, the code official groups, I don't know if there's a publication specifically, but they run trainings every year. And I believe ICC, the code writing body, does like, what are the updates between these years?
Great. Thank you. Oh, and then I see Whitney Kelly also added in the comments, there is a code commentary book that details those differences as well. This isn't a question, but more of a comment from David Bookless. Building codes already exempt agricultural buildings.
And we know that's in the code, but the joy of this is we have to craft good policy that also is politics that is good enough to pass the General Assembly. So some things we're doing because it's good policy, and some things we may be redundant because we think it's important in terms of the politics of getting it passed.
Okay, great. The next question is from Michael Zeke. Under your proposal, what is the role of the state building official? How would this position interact with local building commissioners who have adopted more stringent codes?
I'm going to start on the second one and then throw it to Mindy for the rest of it. The way this is going to work is, let's say we pass this in 2026. The log jam breaks, everybody sings Kumbaya, and we can get some good policy happening. There's a 2-year window where the state code commission gets up and running, they get appointed, and they create that first code. The way this legislation is written is they're going to create code based on the most recent code books. So 2024 is the most recent code. So if this gets passed in 2026, it's going to be writing the 2024 code and adopting that to Missouri. If we don't pass this until 2027, if the 2027 code books are out, it's going to be the 2027 code. So the way that's written, there shouldn't be anybody on a more recent code than what the new state code will be. So our goal is to create a modern code that then the state updates every other code cycle or every 6 years. That tends to be best practice across the nation. We certainly see variation, but that again keeps folks within that ISO standard. It means once this is passed, you've got about 6 years of certainty, whether that's as a builder, a contractor, or an inspector. Everybody knows what the rules are going to be for a nice period of time. So our goal is to make consistent what already exists. If you don't have a code, it's not being touched. And we think that's a good way to go, where we're not taking anybody back to an older code as well. And then Mindy, if you want to add anything to that or talk about the state building official.
Yeah, so the state building official would be in charge of overseeing the office. So think about this similar to like how a state fire marshal works or something like that. Like they have the subject matter expertise around what the building code has. But they also are managing that office. And so managing anything thing with the state aspect of that. So as it comes to working with the local jurisdictions, they would be an additional layer. So like right now, if there's some sort of disagreement between a contractor interpretation and a code official interpretation of a certain rule, they can go to ICC to get that piece. But if there's something that Missouri makes an amendment to this, the state code official would also serve in that role. They're also going to be managing that working alongside, I shouldn't say managing, working alongside the 9-person governor appointed commission to help facilitate their meetings, help facilitate all of those pieces. We assume that there is also going to be a couple admin people that would be hired as part of the state codes office. Again, if you want to look at my favorite spreadsheet with me, I looked at models of how other states staff their codes office to get a sense of like, well, how many people would we need? The smallest I saw was Oklahoma. They've got a they've got a state code official and then 2 admin people who help. Washington State's got 5 people. Ohio's got 11. So there's a couple different ways that we could look at this depending on what the state decides they want for that staffing and that support.
Okay, great. And just a reminder, if anyone else has questions, you can put them either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. The next question is from Whitney Kelly. She says most building permit fees are $6 to $7 per $1,000 of the project cost. Would the state fee include adding an additional $7 per 1,000? This could double permit fees residents have to pay.
To be clear, $7 period, not per 1,000. If you're redoing your HVAC system, or if Centene is building a new entire commercial building, it is capped at $7, period. The idea here is we don't need a lot to fund 3 to 5 people in a state code office. Most of the funding hopefully will be going to training, to making sure that the professionals in the field doing the inspections have the resources they need to stay current. So our hope is that it's not even $7. I mean, our hope is this is like a $2 to $4 fee per permit. But again, it is dollar, not per. So again, how do we have as minimal impact as possible on folks that are building, and still make sure that we've got the resources we need to do to coordinate that state code adoption process, as well as to deliver training to local government folks.
And to add on to that, when I was looking into like how would we fund it, how do other states fund it, and what's that look like, I was modeling, looking at various states. So some states do like that flat state permit fee, like Oklahoma does it that way. Theirs is set at $4 a permit right now. So like they just apply that $4, doesn't matter how big the project is, $4, right? There's other states that do it more that like, okay, it's $7 per thousand, and if it's over 1,000, then it goes $7 for the first whatever million, and then it's $6 for every 1,000 after that, and there's layers to that, and then there's it's this much, but you will minimally pay at least $25 for it. And so I was looking at those options, and as a coalition, we discussed that, and we've had some push like back and forth on what to do that. Ultimately, we decided to go with that small $7 capped, right? It could be, $5, could be $3, but capped at 7 because it made the math easier. And also speaking to Charlie's earlier point, when we're talking to legislators about this who may not understand like the actual permitting process and how those are usually calculated and things like that, saying $7 is easier for an average politician, like a legislator, to understand where we're coming up with that funding.
Thank you. All right. Next question. Will there be any limitations on the local amendments? Would local amendments need to be submitted to the state for approval before a local jurisdiction can adopt them? If you can discuss more about that aspect, it would be appreciated.
Jason, you have hit the, I think, biggest challenge in this from a conceptual perspective is there's a continuum, and how we balance that continuum has been a dominant theme of this entire coalition. Is on one side, we can go fully consistent where state sets the rule, there's no local adjustment. That is the most consistent that we're going to have, and it's the politically most difficult. And also, we don't think that's actually the right place to be. On the other side is where we have now, where local governments can do whatever they want, and there's absolutely zero consistency. So how do we strike that balance of consistency versus local control is one of the fundamental challenges of this effort. To your point, the way it's written for the 2026 version, we're still tweaking this piece. Actually, this is one of the pieces we still need to finalize. We had a great conversation with the Municipal League a few months back where they kind of shared some concerns about this that were really very helpful to us. I think one of the hallmarks of how we've approached this coalition is with humility to listen and learn. So many different people and industries and professions touch this that we need to hear from everybody to make sure we, frankly, don't screw this up. How do we make sure we have it right so it's not just what political hacks like me think people need? It's how do we make sure that we're talking to people that will be touching this so that we're building it with the end user in mind, whether that's a local government, an architect, a contractor, whoever that may be. So the goal is how do we strike the balance of, like Mindy said, we want those local needs to be able to be addressed. Lake of the Ozarks needs, additional dock safety. They've got the flexibility. What we don't want is, yeah, but I really like the purple cement, and the state said clear cement. And if we give total flexibility, we potentially end up almost back where we started, where it's the Wild West again. So we've really tried to nail down how do we strike that balance, and we're still kind of tweaking on that, but I'll let Mindy get in the weeds on what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the 2025 version, if you read into the 2025 version, the way that it's written is a jurisdiction must submit their amendments to the state for approval, for review and approval. And that was something that the State Muni League brought up as like, what about the bureaucracy concern? What if like everyone floods it and it's just this big backlog and nothing gets done, nothing gets approved? And so we heard that it's like, okay, so we have to think about that mechanism in a better way. So we have brainstormed a million ideas. We've looked at a lot of different states and the way they manage it and do it. And like Charlie said, it's one of the biggest balancing issues in trying to find like that right approach. So what we have in the 2026, again, we might be tweaking it a little bit yet. What we have in the 2026 draft right now is that local jurisdictions have to file the amendment to the state. The state has 60 days to review. If the state takes longer than 60 days to respond, it is automatically approved. So that way we can address some of that bureaucracy concern, and so that we can also make sure like, okay, this is moving forward, and that the state does have a chance to review to Like if there is something silly like, oh, but I like the purple cement and the state chose clear, as an example. We don't know what the state's actually going to choose on that front specifically. So that's where we're at right now. We could see it being tweaked a little bit because depending on a person's viewpoint on it, is if that's going too far or if that's not enough. And it's been the biggest balancing act along that one.
And one of the things we've worked on for the 2026 version of the bill is how do we call out some specific criteria by which the State Code Commission can judge local amendments, whether that's local needs, affordable housing, life safety issues, so that there's some criteria where it's not just arbitrary, but what are the areas that, if you're a local government wanting to adjust something, there's good reasons for that.
Yeah, and there's some language in there that if the state rejects your amendment, they have to say why. And when the local jurisdiction says, I want to make this amendment, it's based off of these criteria, like Charlie said.
Okay, great. All right, the next question. I think this might have been addressed to some degree earlier in the discussion, but will you propose a specific code year, or would it be a default year to the most recent or second most recent? And will it include the adoption of the NEC, which is off by 1 year from ICC?
Yes. So we are code agnostic, and I really someday got to come up with a better term than that. We want to build a good process. We want to build a good structure, but we frankly have a coalition that's probably going to fight about what's in the code. So we are not specifically calling out a specific code year. It will be just the most recent when the legislation was adopted. So if it's adopted, legislation is adopted in 2026, it would be the 2024 code. If this takes longer to pass and it's past the 2027 code release, it would be the 2027 code. It would include the NEC, which is an on and off year cycle. So that would absolutely be included. It's also one where we see jurisdictions, some use the International Plumbing Code, some use the Uniform Plumbing Code. The State Code Committee would write a version of each so that local jurisdictions could still choose a UPC or IPC to give that local flexibility as well.
And another reason why we didn't want to specifically call out like certain codes or certain code years or things like that. In Missouri, there is actually a statute that the fire marshals have to inspect every childcare facility as it goes into operation. And it got tied to a code year in the 90s. I want to say it was 94, but I could be wrong on that. And they've never been able to come back and address that in the statute. They have tried a number of times and it never gets across the finish line. So the State Fire Marshal's Office is still inspecting childcare facilities to the 1990s level. And so you'll have, there's a great story that a fire marshal shared with us from Kansas City, where this childcare facility revamped an abandoned building, got it all up to code. They passed the local codes because it was set to, I think, the 2018 or 2015 code or something like that. But they failed the state one because, well, the state one tied to the 90s has different rules than the more recent fire code, right? And so we don't want to name a specific year because we don't want this to be something that happens repeatedly. We also don't want to tie ourselves to specific code writing bodies. We say must be model code model code providers such as, and we list a couple examples. But when I've reviewed statutes from other states, they've had to go back and update because North Dakota, when they passed theirs in the 80s, they tied themselves to BOCA, which is a code writing body that stopped existing in 2000. And so in 2000, they had to go back and update their statute so that they weren't tied to something that no longer existed. And so that's where we've been focusing on process so that in 20 years, when something goes away or something changes, the process is there to address those things that we can't foresee happening in 20, 30 years.
We have time for a couple more questions. So if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. In the meantime, I have a couple questions. The first one is, what has the response been like from lawmakers in Jefferson City so far?
So far, it's been good, but we haven't focused as much on Jeff City yet. We did have a Senate hearing on our bill in 2025. That was actually our goal for this last legislative session. Was we weren't trying to pass it this time, but we just wanted a positive hearing, and when we got that, we think we had good engagement, good Q&A, but we haven't really pushed as hard on the legislature yet. What we've found is this is an issue that people have tried and failed to do for more than half a century. It's been more than 50 years that people have been trying and failing to do this. We've seen a graveyard of attempts. So what we've tried to do is learn from that. And a part of that is how do we do a lot of engagement first before we push hard on the legislature? So how do we build a robust coalition where we can have different messages and different messengers going to different legislators? How do we get across the state of Missouri? And that is Mindy's job, is to run across Missouri and talk to people about building codes, which is just a weird job, but leaving that aside. But how do we build trust? How do we listen and learn? So if there's folks on this call that want to dig in deeper, Mindy will go in the weeds with you. Yes, happy to chat more. How do we make sure that we're continuing to listen and learn to make sure that we're tailoring this in a way that really will suit needs? And we think that by doing that, when we get time to really push in the legislature, there's going to be people back in districts across the state that have talked to us and said, yeah, this makes sense. A lot of the reaction, both from legislators and just people in the community, first is if they're in the industry, there's a little skepticism of what are you trying to do? What's behind this in terms of motivation? But the more we talk to folks, the more we show up, the more it's like, oh no, that makes sense. So, we're cautiously optimistic, but the Missouri legislature is a weird place.
Okay, great. I guess this next question kind of ties into that. So most of our APA members are planners, and a lot of them work for municipalities and interact with building codes and building departments to varying degrees. What do you see as planners' roles in these efforts?
You could slip some of our flyers into like your city councils, like lunch boxes or mail slots. That'd be great. A surreptitious campaign. In all seriousness, though, let us know how this impacts you. How do we make sure that we're building this in a way that makes what you do better? And also, if you see anything that's a red flag of something we're screwing up, definitely let us know about that. We've got a coalition that's mostly industry focused. We want to make sure we're protecting health and safety, but how do we streamline without sacrificing quality so that we can get more buildings built? How do we make sure that we've got more economic development across the state of Missouri? How do we make sure we've got more housing and more affordable housing across the state of Missouri? I work for the REALTORS. The National Association of REALTORS released a report earlier this month. The average age of the first-time home buyer is 40. It was 38 last year. It was 33 a few years ago. And if we go back to 1991, it was 28. We need more housing. We need more buildings. How do we make the process to get that faster, cheaper, but without sacrificing quality and life safety?
I'll also add for planners, because you are in the municipal arena, if this is something that you're just like, oh, I think the rest of my municipal team, like maybe you want to bring your city manager in, maybe you want to bring your building official in, maybe you want to bring, and like, let me come to your town and let's dig in. Like, what are your concerns at your municipal level? What are the things as we've got this set up? Like, does this make sense for what you're doing? If it doesn't, like, what are some ideas that we can come up with together to address those concerns? That's where like the 2024 version of the bill to the 2025 had several changes. 2025 to 2026, again, we're doing changes because I'm going around the state, I'm listening and I'm hearing these concerns. So as a planner, like, this stuff, you interface with it a lot. Like, tell me what you see as like your biggest pain points. And honestly, You want me to come? I'll bring lunch or breakfast to a meeting for y'all too, if you want. If that's what it takes to get a meeting with your municipal folks or any other folks that you're meeting with, I'm more than happy to do that.
And let's
Got a whole bucket of in my budget to do that.
And let's expand on that too. If you've got contacts across the state of Missouri, we've talked to a lot of folks in St. Louis. We've been to Springfield repeatedly, to KC repeatedly, to Midmo repeatedly, but we need to talk to more folks. So if you've got people in your network across the state that you think would like to talk about building codes, which, is niche, let us know. Those introductions are critically important.
Great. Thank you both so much. I don't think we have any other questions in the chat or the Q&A. So with that, I think we are ready to wrap up unless you wanted to say any final words.
We just want to thank you guys so much for having us here. We know that, building codes is not a topic that everybody's excited to talk about, but we really appreciate the engagement and the interest from you guys today. This is how we make this effort better and stronger, is by having these conversations, getting the feedback, and having these touch points. So just very grateful for the invitation today.
And I've put up on the screen right now, you've got my email up there. You've got my calendar link up there. That calendar link will allow you to set up a time for Zoom very easily. But I'm happy to grab coffee. I'm happy to get lunch. I'm happy to do, whatever makes sense with you. If you want to dig in, if you want to see more data, more details, I sometimes get a little too far into the weeds on this. So when I do these kinds of things, I'm like, okay, let's climb back up a little bit and make sure I'm not losing people along with me. So if you want to come to the weeds with me and see my favorite spreadsheets, I've got a few of them. But thank you so much for this opportunity and all the great questions.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate you both. And just a reminder, our winter workshop is December 9th at City Winery. Sign up today. We look forward to seeing you guys again and have a happy Thanksgiving.